Welcome to Untold. Today we're joined by Samira Jafar, who's a writer and community organizer, and I'm very excited to speak with her today. Abdullah, what do you think?
Yeah, honestly, today's episode is so exciting because we're both fans of literature, and our guest, she has her own poetry. She's also a teacher. She's also, like I said, a community organizer, a woman of many talents, and I really can't wait to meet her.
Me neither. I'm really looking forward to see how writing has evolved in her life and how she's decided to create these community spaces for people who share similar interests. I feel like we need more of those spaces, especially in Kuwait.
Yeah, honestly, as someone who reads infrequently, I would say, to be more truthful, reading and writing is such a lost art in this time, of so many fast movements, fast ideas, swiping left and right, up and down. It's such a lost art throughout history. I'm really excited for our audience today to sit with us and have a look at an art form that is, appreciated throughout history.
I agree. I personally love reading and literature. And with that, I hope you guys also get to enjoy our time with our guest today.
And we're back with author Samira Jafar. So I want to first welcome you on The Untold.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you. I'm really looking forward to diving into, as you're a writer and storytelling, that played a big role in my life as well. I actually studied English literature. So I'm very curious to know, what role did storytelling or literature play in your life?
So ever since I was a child, I loved to write, and writing was kind of like my little escape from the world. So when I was at school, I would love to go to the library and just see what kind of books they had. And then every time I'd read a book that I loved, I really wanted to write something similar. And writing was actually the way that I really connected with my sister, because my sister's 4 years older than me, and she would be reading all of these books that were way above my level, but I'd be like, no, I really want to read that too. Like, I want to challenge myself. I want to become better at reading and better at writing. And then somehow it just became such a big passion of mine, and it's continued into adulthood.
I can totally relate to that because I had a huge love of reading growing up. Like, books were my entire world and helped me explore how I saw everything in life. And I think it's cool that wanting to catch up to your sister helped you to actually go above your reading level.
Yeah, that's actually like, it made me really also want to find myself in a way, because I was reading all of these amazing stories and I was like, okay, the main characters are girls kind of like me, like maybe they're teenagers or maybe they're tweens and they're just trying to find themselves. And that really inspired me to want to go on my own kind of life's journey.
Yeah, and I do love how you emphasize that reading was the thing that kind of, ignited your journey. And reading is such a lost art in our timeline. And, unfortunately, with that being said, so I want to talk about because you mentioned people guiding you. So I want to talk about, important teachers or mentors who helped you through your writing process.
Alhamdulillah, throughout my life, I've always been so lucky that I've met so many people who were so supportive of my journey. So my mom, from a young age, she was always telling me, you need to write. Whenever I would write something, she would read it and she'd say, that's so good, and you need to keep going along this path. And then I kind of never took it seriously because I was thinking, well, like a lot of people want to write, but it's such a big dream and you never know if you're going to achieve it. And then when I was in high school, I got really into English, and every time we would have like student awards at the end of the year, I'd win the best English student award. And I had a teacher who really encouraged me to continue writing, because I remember it was 10th grade. We had an essay due, and I wrote about a book that I love until this day. And when I turned in the essay, she came and she talked to me and she said, I can't believe this was written by a 15-year-old. You really
Wow.
need to continue on this journey. Like, you need to follow this path. And that was when I thought, okay, it's not just my family telling me to do this, I should do it. And then when I studied English in university, I was surrounded by so much good writing, so many good stories, so many professors that published their own work, and it made me really think about taking it seriously.
This kind of, mirrors something that I had, and just shows the importance of teachers, because one of my Arabic teachers, Allah yarhama, who had a major influence on me, because for my writing and the answers for exams, I was really bad with memorizing. So if the question required one answer, I would write an entire essay. So the teacher was like, okay, just write a story. And then I wrote story, and then he made me submit it to the contest. And I actually won 2 years
Oh,
on the high school levels in Kuwait.
that's
And it's
amazing.
all thanks to him. And it goes back to your story, the importance of teachers and how much of a role they have in our lives.
Yeah, I'm a teacher now, and so
Oh, really?
yeah, I really try to be that for my students. If yani they have a creative pursuit that they're really interested in, then I would love to encourage them to actually go down that path. And that's what inspired me to get into teaching, because I know how influential teachers can be.
I agree, especially when you said about high school English. I felt the same way. My high school English teachers really pushed me towards going in that direction. One of them, before I even went off to uni, gave me a collection of his own books that were all classics I might encounter at uni. And it was such a touching moment, but it made me really want to just really dive deep into that field because it was a passion of mine from a young age as well. However, I was also very shy and had some anxiety growing up, which may not show now. But did you ever struggle with shyness or anxiety? And if you did, how did you overcome it?
Of course, I feel like everyone does, but I was a really shy child, and I'm actually a shy adult. Like I think I'm still pretty shy. I'm introverted, but what helped was when I kind of moved abroad, I got some more confidence. I felt more sure of myself, and also I don't really look back on my anxiety or my shyness and think that it was a weakness. I actually think that that's part of what encouraged me to write, because I had so many of these internal thoughts and I was thinking, what do I do with them? I had to put them on paper, and then that became a strength of mine. But then the only issue was, okay, how do I get this strength into the world and not just let it live inside of myself? So I think it just got to a point where I was just frustrated at not being myself, because I had so much of myself that I wanted to share, and I wanted to be authentic, and I wanted to be real, and I wanted to people to read the things that I had to say. So I just thought, I am the only thing that is holding me back. So why am I afraid? It's not like someone is telling me don't do this. It's not like someone is telling me you're not good enough. I'm the person who's telling that to myself. And so once I kind of understood that, it was way easier to overcome my anxiety. And I think teaching helps a lot because you talk a lot in front of people and there's a lot of social interaction that goes into it. And so
A daily audience.
yeah, there's the daily audience 24/7. So it's like you really have to step out of your shell.
I'm relating so much to everything that you're saying because I was also an introvert. Well, I still am an introvert. I also found more confidence when I went abroad. So I feel like you're really inspirational to me right now.
Thank you.
Because I also would love to write one day, but I'm very intimidated by the whole process, especially getting your ideas down to paper. Do you think that self-knowledge is a very important aspect for a writer to have?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the more that you know yourself, the easier it is to tell who you are to the world. But I also don't think that it's something that happens immediately. I think that we reach the end of our lives and we still don't fully know who we are, but every day is a step in the right direction. And the more that you challenge yourself and make yourself uncomfortable and put yourself in these situations, the more you can learn about yourself. And then even with writing, if you're afraid to be vulnerable, you don't need to tell your story from the lens of, oh, this happened to me. It can be through the lens of fiction, and it can be a character experiencing that instead of you. And no matter what way you go about it, it's still a way for you to express yourself and to tell the world, okay, this is who I am, and I'm sure of who I am, and I'm ready to share it.
And speaking of sharing, who you're a poet. And so how does writing in a medium that requires you to be, open to the public, contrast with, privacy or having your own inner thoughts? And, how does the balance goes between all of those?
That's a really good question. I think that a lot of poetry is confessional. You're being honest about yourself. But then I also think that good poetry doesn't need to be so explicit. I think that the best messages can be in a metaphor, or they can be in a story that is written as if it's about someone else. And I think that you can still make people feel the same feelings that you feel without talking about your personal life or saying, oh, this happened to me and these were the people involved. I think it's more about how do you capture the feeling? And it's really, that's the challenge of writing. It's like, how do I do this in a way that isn't so clear that this is what happened and this is the story? How do you make it more about the feeling?
I feel you because I'm the kind of person who's always writing in my notes app poems whenever I have a bad day or a good day, just randomly, just like, I'm carrying on today and this is the way things are, but it doesn't feel like me so much when I do it. However, I've always been afraid to post it online or anything like that. How does it feel for you to share your work with people? And do you have any advice for people who maybe want to try doing that?
Honestly, this was something that I struggled with the most first in my writing journey. So, how it started was I wrote so much poetry in university, and then I just started sharing it on my private social media. And then what happened was I got so much good feedback, and I was so shocked at the amount of people who were telling me, like, this is amazing, you should keep going, this resonated with me. And then I realized that I should put myself out there more and just share more of it and not be afraid of holding myself back. And then what I also realized in that process was that every time that you expose yourself or share your art, it's either an opportunity for connection or for growth. So it's either going to be that people say, I love this, this was so relatable, I understand you completely, and that's amazing. But if people say, oh, I thought that this could be better, or I thought that this didn't really resonate with me, it's a chance for you to also look at your writing and think, is there something I can be doing differently here? Is this a way that I can improve? What are some of the things that need to change? And then if you find that nothing needs to change and you're happy with how you're presenting yourself, then I think that that's your sign to just keep going, no matter what people think.
And let's talk about your process for a second. So how does it usually go? Do you get an idea, or do you usually find the right mood, or do you listen to some song and then go into writing? Like, where does, you have a blank page, what's the first word? How do you get into that?
The process is so different every time. It really depends. Sometimes I see something happen, or I'll hear someone say something, and I'll think, okay, that's so interesting, I want to write a story about this. And then I'll save it in my notes app, and I'll go back to it later, and I'll think, okay, how do I turn this into the story that I want it to be? Then sometimes it is maybe from a song, or it's from a movie, or it's from even someone else's story that they told me, and I think, oh, this would be really interesting. How do I capture this? How do I make it fictional? And so it's always different, but what I found is that when I get the idea, I need to write it down in the moment. I can't just leave it for later. Like, I need to go from wherever I am, write it down, and then I can work on it.
Inspiration is everywhere. And I actually agree completely. I always write things down because I know that one day in the future, it will turn into something. So I think it's really beautiful that you're sharing these thoughts with us, and that you got out there and you decided to show the world, Samira and all of her beautiful
Thank
writing.
you.
Would you say that writing is the way you express yourself?
I think so. I think that I express myself better through writing than I do through speaking. And I think that it's something that I see as a strength, because I think, okay, I can communicate effectively like this. But I also think that it's a great way for anyone to express themselves. Even if they don't feel like they're the best writer, I really think that once you write down how you're feeling, you would be surprised at how eloquent you can be and how many people can read it and think, oh, I feel the same way.
Yeah, and honestly, the thing about poetry and, literature in general is that once you pour your heart into it, it's such a medium that's open to interpretation that just gives it so much access to a lot of people, right? You put your heart into it, but then people can take whatever they want from it. And I think that's the beauty of poetry in specific.
That's so true. A lot of times people will read my poetry and they'll think, or they'll tell me, like, this was about this, right? And I'm like, no, it wasn't. Like, where did you get that from? But it's because everyone attaches their own experience and perspective to everything that they read. And then, of course, they're going to do that with your writing too. And it's actually nice to see what it brings out in people and what it makes them think of.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about literature, is the way that different people can interpret it in so many different ways, and the way it resonates so deeply with everyone. We're going to go for a short break, but stay tuned because we have so much more to talk about. And we're back from the break. Samira, we were talking about how literature can really resonate with a lot of people and how that's how both you and I got into that kind of field. Just reading, writing, the way that it connects people across all different aspects of life. And one thing I like is it also connects people throughout history, because you could be reading the day of a life of someone from 100 years ago and they're still feeling the same kind of emotions we feel today. And that actually brings me to a point about how literature can help combat loneliness. Do you think that that's an issue we struggle with today?
Yeah, I actually wrote an essay about this, and I wrote an essay about how in today's world, it feels like so many people are disconnected.
Yeah.
And not even in the sense that they don't have anyone to spend time with. It's that you can be surrounded by people, but within those people, you're afraid to be yourself, or you're afraid to express yourself. And that leaves you with a lot of internal conflict and a lot of sadness. And so what I think is that we should really make more space for people to be their authentic selves. But then I also think that it is a big issue today that a lot of people aren't really ready to tackle that.
Yeah, it's the dilemma of our time, right? Because connection and communication has never been easier throughout history, but at the same time, people are so disconnected from one another.
It's
'cause
actually, yeah.
you can see it in the gatherings everywhere, right? Everyone's on their phone, they're not talking. They're even texting each other in the gathering instead of talking to each other.
Yeah, it's actually crazy because you would think that, as he said, it would make people closer, but it's just creating more disconnection and cognitive dissonance almost. Would you say that the loneliness today is different than previous generations?
I don't know about that because I feel like loneliness has always been there and it always will be there as long as we're human and we're alive. I think that it's a natural feeling. And I think that even the oldest literature has dealt with that, with people who feel isolated and
That's so
feel like
true.
no one understands them. So I feel like it's not that it's different today. What I think it is that today people aren't really looking for solutions. A lot of people are thinking, oh, we're stuck in this endless cycle where we're disconnected, but then they're not really thinking, how do we go outside of that? How do we move beyond this? And I think that actually a lot of times we can be moving in the wrong direction. But that's why I care so much about community planning and bringing people together, because I feel like when people come together and they share their ideas, they're able to be themselves, meet new people that they wouldn't have met. And I really think that it produces a big change within them.
So you got into talking about your role as a community planner. So, what kickstarted this whole thing? Like, what made you decide, oh, this is something I'm really passionate about, I want to pursue?
So when I moved back to Kuwait from university, I missed being a student so much. Although I was a teacher, I really missed being a student. But what I missed was just being in spaces where I feel like I'm learning, where I feel like I am not the smartest person in the room and I want to absorb what everyone else thinks. I want to become a better version of myself. So I really wanted to create spaces where people could have intellectual conversations, learn more about the world, express themselves, talk about deep ideas, read books, because I loved reading, but I was thinking I have no one to discuss this with. And then that's when I started a book club and I started events that were aimed towards that. And it really brought people together, I think.
I think that's beautiful. And honestly, I wish that when I was growing up in Kuwait that we'd had more of that, because I also love to read. I would have loved to be able to talk to more people. All my friends were like, why do you read so much? We just watch a movie, They didn't understand that I see the movie in my brain when I'm reading, But I think it's amazing that you're creating these spaces here now for people. And I love seeing that the youth are getting to connect, even adults, on this kind of field. And I do think that people should try to create more spaces. I would love if we had more cafes, libraries, in general, the things that you make just for people to be able to talk about their passions or ideas and learn things. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that especially young people, they really benefit from spaces that are free and open.
Yes.
Because a lot of them are students, they don't have the resources. And so I know that a lot of creative people and artists want to profit off of their art, and I think that that's completely fair. But I also think that we do need to be conscious about occasionally, even if it's not all the time, creating spaces where people who are younger or who are disenfranchised, where they can feel heard and where they can come and seek out resources and meet people who are going to help them on their journey. Yeah, even as a kid, my favorite thing was going to the library, and so I really want those spaces to still exist for people in the younger generation.
And so from working with the younger generation so much, and especially in terms of your role as a community manager, with the age of social media, have you found, communication between them has, gone down, has dwindled, or is it the same? Or when you put them in a space, they go back to talking to each other, playing with each other?
Yeah, I think that that's so true. On social media and online, our groups are so animated. Like everyone talks, everyone's having a good time. And then when we meet in person, the energy is still there. And I feel like that's really important because online you can really get a sense of who someone is. And that's a really good initial way to connect with them and to find each other. But then I think that once we come and meet in person, we have even more vibrant conversations. And I get to see even more of their personality, which is always amazing. And so I really think that it's a good starting point. But I also think that the online connection needs to come offline. You need to meet in person. It's really important.
I agree completely because as online, people might feel less shy, more comfortable. It's also great for people to connect that may have not usually connected, but nothing beats face-to-face communication at the end of the day, or connecting physically with a person, like how we're talking now. I feel like I get to feel your energy as well with how inspired and passionate you are about this subject.
Thank you. And it is really important because I feel like our lives are so routine. Then it's like, how do you get a break from that routine? How do you step outside of your shell? And the way to do it is to just put yourself in any uncomfortable situation. And so for a lot of people, I'll be meeting them for the first time and they'll think, oh, I was so shy to come here. I was so nervous. I was nervous that I don't know anyone. And then I told them, look, like it's okay. Everyone's welcoming. Everyone loves to have you here. Everyone I've met has been such a good additional member and added value. And so I think like you can shine, like you need to bring that out into the world.
So have you found it difficult to get, I'm assuming you're working with children mainly, to get them out of that shell, to get them out of the shell being so, afraid, so nervous, or is that an easy process?
I work actually with children and with adults, and I find that actually it's shared, the experience of being nervous and being scared to meet new people. And I think that you'd be surprised how easy it is to get them out of their shell, because I think that a lot of people will tell me like, oh, I want to join an event, but I don't want to talk. I just want to sit and listen. But then that person will actually contribute more to the conversation than anyone else, because it's like they are really good at listening, so they have really good thoughts. But then at the same time, they really feel an urge to share those thoughts with everyone else.
I think that they're able to sense the community and that everyone else is on the same wavelength. So those inhibitions they have about, I don't want to talk, I'm going to just sit here and watch, kind of just goes away because they see that everyone is in the same boat as them.
Yeah, and they see that everyone is welcoming. Like, I think all of our fears are in our heads, that people will judge us and people won't want to hear what we have to say. But then we find that that's not true.
Yeah, and I do want to circle back to your role as an author for just a little bit, because I know even for me personally, if I want to go back to writing something, it's like a muscle memory, right? I forgot how it is. So for you personally as an author, do you still keep in touch with all the recent poetry, or do you still read, or has that, over time gotten less?
I think that one of the most important parts of writing is reading. And I think that the more that you read, the better you are as a writer. And I find that when I've been reading a lot, my writing is really good. And when I've kind of taken a break from reading, sometimes I'm like, oh, like this feels stagnant. I don't feel like I'm doing my best work. And so I think that it is really important to keep reading. And I also think that it's a good way to look at some new ideas, because sometimes reading gives you a perspective that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
And what do you usually read? Like, this is putting you on the spot. What are your usual reading passage times?
I love reading fiction, so mainly fiction. I actually don't read poetry, although I write poetry, but I'm not really a fan of reading it. I mostly read fiction.
I mostly read fiction as well.
Nice.
I feel like you can learn everything from fiction.
Yeah, you can. Fiction tells you everything you need to know about the world. If you read fiction, you put yourself in the shoes of someone else. Even if they're a non-existent person in real life, that character is still real in the context of the story, and you're in their shoes for 400 pages.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, I personally read mostly the classics. I haven't read anything from the recent stuff, but it's crazy how much, reading stuff written like 200, 300 years ago, it's still relevant today. It's such a mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's amazing, because a lot of the books I love today are retellings of books from the 20th or 19th century. And I think that those stories remain important. And a lot of writers will think, okay, how can I put like a fresh spin on this?
Yeah.
And write it maybe in an alternative style.
Which is amazing, because I was recently finished reading Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov, and the thing that's amazing about this novel itself is that they wrote in the third person, and then the author was criticizing himself writing a poem. And then like I was reading this, I was like, this is way ahead of its time because it was written like 70 years ago. And when you read it, it's like you're watching a TV show. It feels so, in the presence, in the moment. It doesn't feel dated at all. I think that's the beauty of, literature.
Yeah, and I think that they captured so many of the ideas that today make the most entertaining movies or the most entertaining shows, because I think that they really looked into surrealism and then they looked into the human brain in a way that a lot of people don't really think about. A lot of it is psychological. And so they're able to create the most interesting stories. And those stories, because they're about humanity, they'll never be irrelevant. They're always going to stand the test of time.
I agree. And I think that's why so many people draw inspiration from these stories. Like, some people will say now that there is no such thing as originality. Everything is something being taken from the past or from a different artist. But I think they're missing the whole point of art. It's about expressing yourself. It's about, putting yourself out there. Do you think work just has to be original?
I don't think that there even is such a thing as original art, because someone can say I had an idea and then someone will say I had that idea 20 years ago and I never did anything with it. And then it's like, you never know. Like, I'm sure everyone has had the same thoughts at some point in their lives. But I also think that as long as it's coming from you, it is original. Like, it can even be the same story or a very similar story as something else that you've read or something else that someone has written. But as long as it carries a piece of you, it's never going to be duplicated.
Yeah.
I love that. As long as it carries a piece of you, that's beautiful. What would you say is your proudest moment in, your artistic career so far? And do you have any future projects that you're working on?
That's a good question. I think my proudest moment is that every time I believe I can't do something, I prove myself wrong, which is an amazing thing that I've been able to do.
It really is.
It's a superpower.
Thank you. Because at the beginning, I was like, I can't share my poetry. I'm too shy. I'm too hesitant. And then I did it and I realized that I had no reason to be afraid. And then I always wanted to really write short stories, and I had written some, but I didn't think that they were good. And then I thought, okay, let me actually pursue this. And then I wrote short stories. And now I'm publishing a book of short stories, so that's my next project.
That's amazing.
Thank you. But it's just that every time I had a thought that I can't do something, I'm the person who has to prove myself wrong. So that's the thing that I've been most proud of.
Well, they always say you are your own worst enemy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And with that, we have reached the end of today's episode. So, Samira, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Well, it was wonderful to have you. I feel like a lot of people who are starting out in writing will be really inspired, especially about just getting out of your own way and just doing it, put yourself out there. And I hope that you all enjoyed today's episode. That's all we have for today.
And with that, unfortunately, that's the end of today's episode of The Untold. Honestly, Lujain, the thing I'm really excited, or I was so happy about in this episode, is that we talked about poetry in particular. Because poetry, even us, going through our roots, as Arabs and throughout the Middle East, poetry is such a integrated art form throughout our DNA. And I was so joyful to talk about it today.
As was I. I thought that Samira's way of looking at things was really unique and inspired.
Yeah.
I loved how she said that the best thing you can do is just stop being your own obstacle, just put your own work out there. Because I feel like a lot of people have that creativeness inside of them and may want to write, like myself included.
Yeah.
Like I would love to be able to, just sit and write a book or put my own poems out there, but it's something I've always been afraid of. And seeing someone who, even though she has that fear, has overcome it herself, it was really an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah, and like going through her process where she talks, getting inspiration from basically everywhere, right? From listening to music, from interacting with people, observing people. That is such a high level of talent to be able to see something and to actually transform your thoughts into words and then to actually make a poetry out of it. It's such an amazing talent.
It really is. And the fact that she's also a teacher and is guiding the next generation of possible creatives or artists, I think that's amazing. And I feel like she will really help a lot of people pursue their passions.
Well, at least we can end this episode knowing that, future generations are in good hands. So thank you, Samira, for joining us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. But that was it for us on The Untold. Until next time, goodbye for now.
Goodbye.